3 years after my father died, I found a letter hidden inside an old wooden envelope. The first sentence made me cry. The second made me smile. The third made me stop breathing, because according to that letter, I wasn't an only child. Somewhere in America, I had a sister I had never met. A sister who had spent decades believing our father abandoned her. But that wasn't the biggest secret, not even close. The truth waiting behind that letter would uncover lies, heartbreak, hidden family members, and a journey that changed every part of my life. Welcome back to Inspired Real Events, where ordinary people meet impossible family and the quiet ones learn the loudest lessons. If betrayal, gratitude, and slow burn justice are your thing, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe. Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something. I thought I was grieving my father's death. What I didn't realize was that I was actually grieving an entire family I never knew existed. This story contains heartbreak, family secrets, forgiveness, second chances, and one discovery that changed my life forever. And every word of it began with a dusty box hidden in an attic. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 35 years old. And 3 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I sat in a hospital parking lot laughing so hard I almost cried. Then I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Life is funny that way sometimes. 1 minute you're laughing. The next minute you're staring at a steering wheel wondering how everything fell apart so quickly. If you saw me today, you would probably think I have a normal life. A small house, a golden retriever named Charlie, a garden that refuses to grow tomatoes, a coffee addiction that should probably be illegal, nothing special, nothing dramatic. But every time I look in the mirror, I remember the woman I used to be. The woman who trusted everyone. The woman who believed love was enough. The woman who thought people always meant what they said. Oh, how wrong I was. My story starts in a tiny town in Oregon. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody. The kind of town where rumors travel faster than ambulances. My father owned an auto repair shop. My mother worked at the local library. We weren't rich, not even close. But we were happy. At least that's what I believed. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting on the floor of the library while my mom organized books. I loved stories. I loved disappearing into other people's worlds. Back then, I thought every story had a happy ending. I hadn't learned yet that real life doesn't follow those rules. When I was 12 years old, my father sat me down on the front porch. I still remember the smell of rain on the pavement. He looked nervous. That should have been my first clue. "Emily," he said softly, "your mom and I need to tell you something." Immediately, my stomach dropped. Kids always know. They know before the words arrive. They know before the adults admit it. My mother came outside. Her eyes were red, very red. She sat beside me. Then my father said the sentence that changed everything. "We're getting divorced." Just like that. No warning, no preparation, no explanation. I stared at them. Then I laughed, actually laughed. Ha ha ha! A weird, nervous laugh, because I thought they were joking. They weren't. The silence afterward felt enormous. I remember looking at my mother's wedding ring, then looking at my father's, then looking back at their faces, and suddenly it became real. I started crying immediately, not graceful movie crying, not a single tear rolling down my cheek. No, ugly crying, the kind that makes your face hurt, the kind that makes you gasp for air, the kind that leaves you exhausted. That night I cried myself to sleep. The next night too, and the night after that. Eventually the tears stopped, but something else took their place. Fear became my shadow, fear that people leave, fear that promises break, fear that love disappears. For years I carried that fear everywhere, into friendships, into school, into every relationship I ever had, especially relationships. Years later, when I was 22, I met Daniel. And for the first time in my life, fear disappeared, at least for a little while. Daniel had dark hair, green eyes, and the kind of smile that made you forget what you were saying. The first time we met was embarrassing. I spilled iced coffee all over his shirt, not a little, a lot, an impressive amount, the entire cup. He looked down, I looked down, then he started laughing. Ha ha ha! And somehow I started laughing too. 5 minutes later, we were sitting together drinking replacement coffees. 3 months later, we were dating. 2 years later, we got married. Everyone said we were perfect together. Even my mother, especially my mother, I wanted to believe them. God, I wanted to believe them. The first few years really were wonderful. We traveled. We adopted Charlie. We stayed up late watching terrible movies. We danced in the kitchen. We made pancakes at midnight. Sometimes I would wake up before Daniel just to watch him sleep. And every single time I thought the same thing, I'm safe. For the first time in my life, I'm safe. Then came the phone call. Funny how entire lives change because of a phone call. One ringtone, one conversation, one moment, that's all it takes. I was 32, working at a marketing company, sitting at my desk, answering emails, thinking about dinner, nothing unusual. Then my phone rang. The screen showed my mother's name. I smiled, answered, and instantly knew something was wrong. Her voice sounded broken, absolutely shattered. Emily! Just hearing my name made my stomach twist. What happened? Silence, then a sob, a terrible sob, the kind that comes from somewhere deep inside a person, the kind that scares you. And then she said the words, "Your dad had a heart attack." Everything stopped. The room, the sounds, the people, the world, everything. I don't remember grabbing my purse. I don't remember leaving work. I don't remember driving. I only remember arriving at the hospital, running through the doors, seeing my mother, and knowing before she spoke, because grief has a face, and I saw it. My father died that afternoon, just like that. One ordinary day, one ordinary heartbeat. Then nothing. Gone. I sat in that hospital chair for hours. People kept talking. Doctors, nurses, family, friends. I heard none of it. My brain refused. I just stared at the floor. At one point, an elderly nurse handed me tissues. I looked at her. She smiled sadly. And for some reason, that kindness broke me completely. I started crying again, harder than I had cried since childhood. Life felt unfair, cruel, wrong. My father was only 61. He should have had more years, more birthdays, more Christmas mornings, more terrible dad jokes, more everything. Instead, there was silence. The funeral came a week later. Hundreds of people attended. Apparently, my father had helped half the town. People told stories I had never heard, stories about kindness, generosity, compassion. One man cried while describing how my father fixed his truck for free when he couldn't afford repairs. Another woman talked about how he secretly paid her heating bill one winter. I sat there listening, crying, smiling, crying again, and realizing something important. The richest people aren't the ones with money. They're the ones people remember. My father left behind more love than most millionaires ever will. I wish the story got easier after that. It didn't, because grief changes people. It changed my mother, it changed me, and it changed my marriage. At first, Daniel was supportive, very supportive. He held me when I cried, cooked dinner, handled bills, took care of everything. I loved him for it. But grief lasts longer than people expect. Weeks become months. Months become years. Eventually, the world expects you to move on, smile again, act normal again, be okay again. The problem was, I wasn't okay, and deep down I knew it. I just didn't realize how much trouble that would cause. One night, Daniel sat across from me at the dinner table. He looked exhausted, really exhausted. "Emily!" His voice was quiet, too quiet. My heart immediately sank, because I recognized that tone. Nobody uses that tone when they're about to say something good. And what happened next changed my life forever. And what happened next changed my life forever. Daniel stared down at his plate. Not eating, not moving, just staring. That scared me more than if he had yelled. People yell when they still have energy left. People go quiet when they're running out. "Emily," he said again, "we need to talk." Those 4 words. Nobody likes those 4 words. Nobody has ever heard those 4 words and thought, "Oh wow, this is going to be fantastic." My stomach twisted. I suddenly wasn't hungry anymore. "What about?" He rubbed his forehead. Then he sighed, a long, exhausted sigh. "I miss my wife." Words hit harder than I expected, because part of me knew exactly what he meant. Still, hearing it out loud hurt. "I'm right here." "No," he shook his head. "No, you're not." Silence. The kitchen suddenly felt tiny, too tiny, like the walls were slowly moving closer. "I know you're hurting," he said. "I know losing your dad changed everything." His voice cracked. "And I've tried, Emily. God knows I've tried." I looked away because I knew he was telling the truth. He had tried, for months, maybe years. But grief had turned me into a ghost. I went to work, came home, sat on the couch, went to bed, repeated, again, 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 day after day, week after week, month after month. Meanwhile, Daniel kept trying to pull me back into the world. Date nights, weekend trips, movies, friends, conversations, hope. I rejected all of it, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't, and eventually, people get tired, even good people, especially good people. "Emily," he whispered, "I don't know how to reach you anymore." That sentence broke my heart. Because for the first time I realized something. I wasn't the only one grieving. Daniel was grieving too. He was grieving me. The version of me that had disappeared. The version he married. The version that laughed. The version that danced in the kitchen. The version that wasn't trapped inside sadness. Tears filled my eyes. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "I'll do better." I meant it, every word. I truly meant it, and for a while, things improved. Not dramatically, not magically, but slowly. We started taking evening walks again, started talking again, started cooking together again. Small things, normal things, human things. I thought we were healing. I really did. Ha ha ha. Funny, isn't it? Sometimes life lets you believe everything is getting better right before it knocks you flat. 3 months later, I received an email. A completely ordinary email. Nothing special. No warning signs, no flashing lights, just a mistake. A simple mistake, at least that's what it looked like. The email arrived while I was at work. The subject line read, "Thank you for your reservation." Reservation? I frowned, opened it, immediately confused. The email thanked Daniel and another woman for booking a luxury weekend package at a resort 2 states away. I blinked. Read it again. Then again. Then again. My brain struggled to process it because there had to be an explanation. Obviously. There had to be. Maybe it was spam. Maybe somebody typed the wrong email. Maybe then I saw the date, next weekend, and underneath it, Daniel's full name, my husband, my actual husband. My heart started pounding. Fast, very fast. Suddenly I couldn't hear anything around me, not my coworkers, not the phones, nothing. I picked up my phone, called Daniel immediately, no answer, called again. Nothing, 3rd time, voicemail. My hands started shaking, not dramatically, tiny shakes, the dangerous kind. The kind you don't notice until you're trying to hold something. I left work early. Drove home. The entire drive my mind kept inventing explanations. Good explanations. Reasonable explanations. Anything except the obvious one. Please don't be what I think. Please, please, please. When I got home, Daniel wasn't there. His laptop was. Normally I would never touch it. Never, but panic changes people. I opened it, my heart hammering. The password was the same as always. Named after our dog, simple, trusting, familiar. I logged in, opened his email, and found everything, every message, every photo, every plan, every lie. Her name was Lauren. She was 30, worked in real estate, lived 40 minutes away. And she had been in love with my husband for nearly a year. A whole year. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. Literally couldn't breathe. I remember standing up, then sitting back down, then standing again, like my body didn't know what to do. One message stood out. I still remember every word. Lauren had written, "I can't wait until it's finally just us." Daniel replied, "Soon." Just one word, soon, that's all. One word destroyed 10 years of marriage. I started laughing, actually laughing, ha ha ha, a strange, broken laugh. The kind that comes when reality becomes too absurd, because I suddenly understood something while I was grieving my father. My husband had been building a future with someone else. The timing felt impossible, cruel, ridiculous, like a bad movie. Then the laughter disappeared, and the tears arrived. I slid onto the kitchen floor, curled into a ball, and cried harder than I thought a person could cry. Hours passed, I don't know how many. Eventually the front door opened. Daniel came home. I heard his footsteps, then silence because he saw me, saw the laptop, saw his email open, saw everything. Neither of us spoke, not at first. Finally he whispered, "Emily." The guilt in his voice confirmed everything. I looked up, my face covered in tears, and asked the only question that mattered. Why? Such a small word. Why? Why her? Why now? Why us? Why throw away 10 years? Why? Daniel closed his eyes, and for several seconds he couldn't answer. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed again, ha ha ha, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Nobody accidentally has a year-long affair. Nobody accidentally books romantic vacations. Nobody accidentally lies thousands of times. "I loved you," my voice cracked. "I still love you." He started crying, actual tears, and somehow that made everything worse. Because villains are easier. Villains are simple. Daniel wasn't a villain. He was a flawed human being who made devastating choices. Those are harder to hate. Much harder. For nearly 2 hours we talked, cried, argued, explained, repeated ourselves over and over, until finally he admitted the truth. He wasn't sure who he wanted anymore. That was the moment my marriage ended. Not legally, not officially, but emotionally, spiritually, completely, Because once someone says they aren't sure they choose you, the choice has already been made. Ah. I wish I could tell you I left immediately. I didn't. Most people don't. Real life isn't that clean. I stayed for a while, trying, hopping, praying, believing, but trust is strange, once shattered. Every little thing becomes suspicious. Every late text, every missed call, every smile, every silence, everything hurts. 3 months later, Daniel moved out. The day he left was surprisingly quiet. No screaming, no dramatic speeches, no broken dishes, just boxes and silence. Charlie sat by the front door watching, confused, waiting for Daniel to come back inside. He never did. After the moving truck disappeared, I sat on the front porch, the exact same way I had sat on a porch when I was 12 years old, the day my parents divorced. Life felt like a circle, a painful one, and for the first time in years, I felt completely alone. I didn't know it then, but the hardest part of my story was still ahead, because 6 months later, I would discover something that would change everything, something hidden, something my father left behind before he died. Something nobody knew existed. And when I finally opened that old dusty box, my entire understanding of my family would change forever, because 6 months later, I would discover something that would change everything. Something hidden, something my father left behind before he died, something nobody knew existed. And when I finally opened that old dusty box, my entire understanding of my family would change forever. It happened on a Saturday, a boring Saturday. The kind of day nobody remembers. Gray skis, cold wind. Half-finished coffee sitting on the kitchen counter, Charlie snoring beside the couch. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, at least that's what I thought. My mother called around noon. We weren't particularly close anymore, not after the divorce, not after everything, but we still spoke occasionally. Her voice sounded nervous, very nervous. "Emily." "Yeah, I found something." I frowned. "What kind of something?" A long pause. Then she said, "It belonged to your father." Immediately, my heart tightened. Even after 3 years, hearing those words still hurt. Belong to your father. Some pain never completely leaves. You just learn how to carry it. "What is it?" "I don't know." Another pause. "It's a box." A box, that's all, just a box. Yet something about her voice made my stomach twist. An hour later, I was driving to her house. The entire way there, I kept wondering what could possibly be inside. Old photographs, military records, letters, tools, maybe old baseball cards. My father collected weird things. One time he spent 3 months looking for a vintage wrench. A wrench. Who spends 3 months searching for a wrench? Ha ha ha. Dad did. When I arrived, my mother was waiting on the porch, holding a cardboard box. It looked ancient. Dust covered the corners. The tape had turned yellow. My mother handed it to me carefully, almost respectfully. "I found it in the attic." I stared at it, suddenly nervous, for reasons I couldn't explain. "What's inside?" She shook her head. "I never opened it." That surprised me. My mother was curious by nature, painfully curious. The fact that she hadn't looked inside felt important, very important. I carried the box to my car, drove home, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for nearly 20 minutes. Charlie stared too, not helpfully, just because he thought everything belonged to him. Eventually, I took a deep breath, opened the box. The first thing I saw was photographs, hundreds of photographs, some I'd seen before, some I hadn't, family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, camping trips, normal memories, happy memories. I smiled, then cried a little, then smiled again. Ah. Grief is strange. One photograph can destroy you, another can save you. I carefully sorted through them. Then I noticed something unusual. At the bottom of the box sat a wooden envelope. Not paper, wood, handmade, beautifully carved. My father's handwriting covered the front. My heart stopped because it said, "For Emily." Just that, for Emily. My hands immediately started shaking. I sat down very slowly, suddenly afraid, terrified actually, because I realized something. My father intended for me to find this, not my mother, not anyone else, me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, several pages, folded neatly. I recognized his handwriting instantly. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen that handwriting in years, yet somehow it felt like yesterday. I unfolded the pages, then started reading. The first line nearly broke me. "If you're reading this, Pumpkin, then I'm probably gone." Pumpkin, that was his nickname for me. Nobody else ever called me that. Nobody. Tears immediately filled my eyes. I wiped them away, tried again. The letter continued. "If life worked the way I wanted, we'd be sitting together while you read this. Unfortunately, life has never listened to me very well." I laughed through tears. Ha ha ha. That sounded exactly like him. Exactly. I kept reading. Page after page. Memory after memory, advice, stories, regrets, love, so much love. The words felt alive, like he was sitting beside me, talking, smiling, being Dad. Then I reached page 4, and everything changed. Everything, my father wrote. There is something I've hidden for most of your life. I froze completely, my eyes locked on the page, my heart beat suddenly louder, faster. The next sentence hit me like lightning. Emily, you have a sister. I stopped breathing, literally stopped breathing. I stared at the words, read them again, then again, then again. No, impossible, I didn't have a sister. I was an only child, always had been, always, right. My hands trembled, the page shook, I continued reading. Apparently years before meeting my mother, my father had been engaged, deeply in love. Certain she was the one, then tragedy happened, a car accident, a terrible accident. His fiancée survived, barely, but the relationship didn't. The trauma changed everything. Eventually they separated. My father moved away, started over, met my mother years later, built a new life, a new family, or so he thought, because several years after leaving, a letter arrived, a shocking letter. His former fiancée had given birth shortly after their separation. A daughter. His daughter, my father's daughter, my half-sister. He never knew, not until years later. The revelation destroyed him. According to the letter, he tried reaching out several times, but her mother refused. Eventually, she disappeared completely, moved away, changed addresses, changed phone numbers, vanished. For decades he searched, sometimes successfully, usually not, but he never stopped. Never. My eyes raced across the page, desperate now, hungry for answers. Then I found her name, Sarah. Her name was Sarah, 38 years old, 3 years older than me, somewhere out there, existing. Living, laughing, crying, breathing, while I had absolutely no idea she existed. I started crying again, not from sadness, not entirely. It was bigger than that, more complicated, a lifetime of emotions arriving at once. Shock, confusion, curiosity, hope, fear, everything. Then I reached the final pages. My father had spent years gathering information, addresses, phone numbers, records, clues, every lead he'd ever found. The very last page contained something recent, a current address, an email, a phone number. My father's final note sat underneath. If I never find the courage to reach her, maybe you will. I stared at that sentence. For a long time, maybe you will. The room felt silent, too silent. Charlie rested his head on my knee. As if he somehow understood, I looked at the phone number, then looked away, then looked back. My heart pounded. What was I supposed to do? Call, text, email, ignore it? What if she hated me? What if she hated him? What if she wanted nothing to do with our family? The possibilities terrified me. For 3 days I carried that letter everywhere. Work, home, bed, everywhere. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't stop imagining her. Did she look like Dad? Did she laugh like him? Did she tell terrible jokes? Did she love coffee? Did she know about me? Questions, endless questions. Finally, on the 4th night, I made a decision, a crazy decision, a terrifying decision. I opened my laptop, found the email address, and began typing. The message took nearly an hour. Every sentence felt impossible. How do you tell someone you're their sister? How? There isn't a guidebook for that. Eventually, I finished. My finger hovered above the send button for nearly 5 minutes. Then, click, message sent. Immediately, I panicked. Absolute panic. Ha ha ha. I actually considered unplugging the internet, as if that would somehow undo it. Too late. The message was gone, floating through cyberspace, heading toward a woman I'd never met, a woman connected to me by blood, a woman who might completely ignore me, or worse, reply. The next 48 hours felt like 48 years. Every notification made me jump. Every vibration made my heart race. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then on Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived. My breath caught. The sender's name read Sarah Mitchell. I stared at it, frozen, terrified, hopeful, everything at once, slowly, very slowly. I opened the message. The first sentence made tears fill my eyes. Emily, I've been waiting 20 years for someone from your family to find me. And in that moment, I knew my father's story wasn't over yet, because somehow, after decades apart, 2 sisters were finally about to meet. I stared at Sarah's email for nearly 10 minutes before I could breathe normally again. 20 years. 20 years she had been waiting, waiting for someone, waiting for an answer, waiting for a family she wasn't sure even wanted her. My hands shook as I read the message again, and again, and again. The email wasn't angry, it wasn't bitter, it wasn't cold. It was surprisingly warm. That somehow made it harder, because I suddenly realized this wasn't just a mystery anymore. This was a real person, A woman with a life. A woman with memories. A woman who had spent decades wondering about the same father I grew up with. The email ended simply. "If you'd like to meet, I'd like that too." I stared at those words, then laughed nervously. Ha ha ha. Meet, just like that, as if we were old friends, as if our lives weren't about to collide in the most unbelievable way imaginable. 3 days later, we agreed to meet. A small coffee shop halfway between our cities. Neutral territory, safe territory. I barely slept the night before. Every possible scenario played through my mind. What if she hated me? What if she blamed my mother? What if she blamed my father? What if we had absolutely nothing in common? The questions were endless. The answers weren't. The next morning, I spent 45 minutes choosing an outfit, then another 20 minutes changing it. Then another 15 minutes changing it again. Charlie watched the entire process, looking deeply concerned, or maybe confused. Honestly, with Charlie, it was hard to tell. Finally, I left, my stomach twisting tighter with every mile. When I reached the coffee shop, I almost turned around, actually almost left, because suddenly this felt real, terrifyingly real. Then I saw her, standing near the entrance, holding a coffee cup, looking around nervously, and my entire world stopped because she looked like Dad, not a little, a lot. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way of standing, the same everything. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Sarah noticed me, our eyes met. And somehow she knew, instantly, no introduction, no explanation, she simply knew. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," I nodded, unable to speak. For several seconds we just stared at each other, two strangers, two sisters, 35 years of separation standing between us. Then she laughed, a shaky, nervous laugh. Ha ha ha! And somehow I laughed too. The tension broke instantly, just like that. We hugged, not awkwardly, not cautiously. We hugged like people who had been missing something their entire lives without realizing it. And suddenly we were both crying, right there in front of the coffee shop. Complete strangers walking past probably thought we were insane. Honestly, they wouldn't have been entirely wrong. Inside, we found a table near the window. Neither of us knew where to begin, so we started with simple things: jobs, pets, favorite movies, favorite foods, childhood memories, normal conversations. But every few minutes one of us would stop, smile, and say something ridiculous. "You wrinkle your nose exactly like Dad," or "You laugh exactly like him," or "Oh my gosh, you use the same expressions." Ha ha ha, the similarities were impossible to ignore. At one point, Sarah started laughing so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "Dad used to hate mushrooms." I blinked. "So do I," her eyes widened. "No way." "Way." Then we both burst out laughing again, for the first time in years, really laughing. The kind of laughter that feels like sunshine. Hours passed, neither of us noticed. Then eventually the conversation shifted, became more serious, more difficult. Sarah looked down at her coffee, quiet for a moment. Then she sighed, and I knew there was something she hadn't told me yet, something important. "Emily," her voice softened. "There's something you should know." Immediately my stomach tightened. "What is it?" She hesitated, long enough to scare me, then finally spoke. "My mother lied." The words hung in the air, heavy, very heavy. Sarah looked out the window, avoiding my eyes. "For most of my life, she told me your father abandoned us." My chest tightened, hard, because I already knew that wasn't true. The letter proved it. Dad searched for her for decades, decades. Sarah nodded slowly. "As I got older, things stopped making sense." She swallowed. "Every time I asked questions, she'd get angry." Her voice cracked slightly. "Really angry." I didn't interrupt, I just listened. Sarah continued. "When I was 25, I found old letters." My heart skipped. "Letters, Dad's letters," she nodded, as if reading my thoughts. "Boxes full of them." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "He never stopped writing." Neither of us spoke, not for several seconds. "He wrote on birthdays." She wiped her eyes. "He wrote on Christmas." Another tear rolled down her cheek. "He wrote when I graduated high school." I felt my own tears returning. "He wrote when I turned 18. Her voice broke completely. And I never received any of them. The coffee shop suddenly felt silent, like the entire world had paused to listen. Sarah took a shaky breath. "My mother hid every single one." I closed my eyes. Pain shot through my chest. Not because I was surprised, because I wasn't, because I knew how much Dad loved, how hard he fought, how impossible it must have been, for decades, thinking his daughter wanted nothing to do with him, when the truth was, she never even knew he was trying. Sarah started crying openly now. So did I. People around us politely looked away, pretending not to notice, giving us privacy, a gift I'll never forget. After a few minutes, Sarah smiled sadly. You know what hurts the most? What? She laughed softly, not a happy laugh, a broken one. Ha ha ha. I spent 20 years being angry at a man who never abandoned me. That sentence shattered something inside me because I realized Dad never got his ending. He never got closure. Never got reconciliation. Never got to hear his daughter say she understood. And now he never would. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Sarah reached into her purse, pulled out an old photograph, and slid it across the table. I picked it up, my breath caught instantly. It was Dad, much younger, standing beside a pregnant woman. Sarah's mother, his arm wrapped around her, both smiling, both happy, both completely unaware of the future waiting for them. I stared at the picture. Then something caught my eye, something strange, something unexpected. A man stood in the background, partially hidden. Watching them, at first I thought nothing of it. Then Sarah pointed. That's him. I frowned. Him who? Her face darkened. The warmth disappeared completely. The answer came quietly. My mother's second husband. The room suddenly felt colder. Sarah's expression changed. Harder now, more guarded. And that's when she told me something that made my blood run cold. The man in the photograph wasn't just her stepfather. He was the reason our father disappeared from her life. And according to Sarah, he had spent years making sure she never discovered the truth. What happened next would uncover secrets neither of us expected. Secrets hidden for over 30 years. Secrets that would completely change how we saw our families. And before it was over, one person would finally be forced to answer for every lie. The man in the photograph wasn't just Sarah's stepfather. He was the reason our father disappeared from her life. And according to Sarah, he had spent years making sure she never discovered the truth. I stared at her, unable to speak. My coffee sat untouched between us. Cold now, forgotten. What do you mean? I finally asked. Sarah took a long breath, then another, like she was preparing herself, not for me, for the memories. The man in that picture was Richard. She looked down at the photograph. He married my mother when I was 6. Her voice remained calm, too calm, the kind of calm people learn after surviving something difficult. At first, he seemed nice. A sad smile crossed her face. They always do. That sentence alone told me enough. I felt my stomach tighten. Sarah continued. Richard hated your father. Why? I don't think he could stand the idea that someone came before him. She shook her head slowly. Maybe jealousy, maybe insecurity. Maybe both. She laughed softly, a broken little laugh. Ha ha ha. Whatever the reason, he spent years trying to erase him. The words settled heavily between us. Erase him, not forget, not move on, erase. That's different, very different. Sarah reached into her purse again. This time she pulled out a small stack of envelopes, old envelopes, yellowed with age, the edges worn, some still sealed. My breath caught. These are some of the letters. I stared at them, my father's handwriting right there in front of me. Letters he wrote to a daughter he never got to know, letters she never received. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Sarah handed me one. Carefully, almost reverently, I opened it. The paper crackled softly. Inside was a birthday letter. Sarah's 10th birthday. Dad had written, Happy birthday, kiddo. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, I want you to know that I think about you every single day. A tear slipped down my cheek. Then another. Then another. I kept reading. I don't know your favorite color. I don't know your favorite food. I don't know what makes you laugh, but I love you anyway. I couldn't continue. The words blurred. Sarah wiped tears from her own face. I found dozens. Dozens. My chest hurt, actually hurt, because every one of those letters represented hope. A father refusing to give up. A father trying. A father loving someone from a distance. Then Sarah said something unexpected. There's more. My head lifted. More? How could there possibly be more? Sarah reached for her phone, opened a photograph, then slid it across the table. I looked and froze. It was a filing cabinet. Old, metal, ugly, ordinary. What's this? Richard's office. I frowned, still confused. Then Sarah zoomed in. One drawer, bottom left, locked. My confusion deepened, until she spoke again. After Richard died last year, I cleaned out his office. A chill ran down my spine. Something about her tone felt important, very important. And Sarah swallowed, then quietly said, I found everything. Everything. The word landed like a hammer. What does that mean? Tears returned to her eyes. I mean everything. Her voice cracked. The letters. She looked away. The court documents. Another pause. The private investigator reports. My heart skipped. Private investigator, what? Sarah nodded, seeing my confusion. Richard hired investigators to track Dad. I felt sick, instantly sick. Why? He wanted to know whenever Dad got close. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm, too crowded. My pulse hammered. Sarah continued. If Dad found a new address, she swallowed. Richard made sure it changed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, not because it was impossible, because it was so cruel, so deliberate, so calculated for decades, decades. Richard had been standing between a father and daughter, not by accident, on purpose. Ah. Sarah wiped away fresh tears. I found reports going back 20 years. 20 years, my God, 20 years. Then she showed me another photograph. This one made my blood run cold, a legal document, signed, dated, official. The document stated that several letters from my father had been intercepted and withheld. Not lost, not misplaced, withheld intentionally. I felt anger rising, real anger. The kind that starts deep in your chest. The kind that makes your hands shake. The kind that leaves you speechless. For years, I'd imagined my father wondering why Sarah never responded, wondering if she hated him, wondering if she rejected him. Meanwhile, she never knew he was reaching out. Not once, not ever. The injustice of it felt unbearable. Sarah stared out the window, watching people pass, completely unaware of the story unfolding beside them. Then she smiled sadly. You know what the worst part is? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Still, I asked. What? She laughed softly, without humor. Ha ha ha. He actually convinced himself he was protecting me. That hit hard, because it sounded true, not right, but true. Some people do terrible things while believing they're heroes. Maybe that's what makes them dangerous. Sarah sighed. Richard always said Dad abandoned us. She shook her head, and after enough years I believed him. The silence that followed felt enormous. Eventually I asked the question I'd been avoiding. What did your mother say? Sarah looked away. For several seconds she didn't answer. Then finally, nothing. Nothing, I frowned. What do you mean? She admitted everything. My stomach tightened. Sarah's eyes filled again. But she kept saying the same thing. What? A long pause. Then Sarah whispered, I thought I was protecting you. Protecting. That word again. Protecting from disappointment. Protecting from confusion. Protecting from heartbreak. People do terrible things in the name of protection. Sometimes they destroy the very thing they're trying to save. Ah. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Sarah surprised me. She smiled, a real smile, small but real. At least now I know the truth. I smiled back. So did I, because truth hurts, but lies poison, and poison lasts longer, much longer. A few weeks later Sarah called me, late at night, sounding excited, actually excited. Emily, what happened? You need to come over. Immediately, urgently, my heart jumped. What is it? She laughed, a genuine laugh this time. Ha ha ha. Just get here. 2 hours later, I was sitting in her living room, surrounded by boxes, dozens of boxes, more letters, more photographs, more memories, and right in the middle sat something neither of us expected, a small wooden chest, locked. Neither of us had seen it before. Neither of us knew what was inside, but one thing was certain. It belonged to our father, and somehow, after all these years, one final secret was still waiting for us. One final truth, one final piece of his story. Neither of us realized it yet. But what we would discover inside that chest would change everything we thought we knew about our family. And before the night was over, both of us would be crying, not from grief, not from anger, but from a kind of love that survives even after people are gone. Neither of us realized it yet, but what we would discover inside that chest would change everything we thought we knew about our family. And before the night was over, both of us would be crying, not from grief, not from anger, but from a kind of love that survives even after people are gone. The wooden chest sat in the middle of Sarah's living room floor. Small, dark oak, beautifully crafted. The kind of thing somebody keeps for decades, not because it's valuable, because what's inside is. Sarah knelt beside it. I sat across from her, both of us staring, neither moving. It felt ridiculous. Ha ha ha. Two grown women acting like archaeologists about to uncover a lost civilization. But somehow this felt bigger than a box, much bigger. Because everything we discovered so far had changed our understanding of Dad. What if this changed it again? Sarah finally broke the silence. You open it. No way. You. For a moment we argued like sisters, actual sisters, and suddenly we both started laughing, real laughing, the kind that sneaks up on you. Ha ha ha. For one brief moment the heaviness disappeared. Then Sarah reached for the key she'd found taped beneath the chest. A tiny brass key, old, worn, used. She slid it into the lock, turned, click. The sound echoed through the room. Neither of us breathed. Slowly, carefully. Sarah lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes. Photographs, journals, documents, and one videotape, a VHS tape, ancient, dusty, a label written in Dad's handwriting. For my girls. My girls, not girl, girls, plural. Sarah covered her mouth, instantly crying. I felt tears burning my eyes too. Because suddenly it hit me. Dad always knew, always, even when he couldn't find Sarah, even when he had no idea where she lived, even when decades passed, he still thought of us together. His girls, the room became very quiet. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Sarah whispered, "I can't do this." I knew exactly what she meant. Some moments are too big, too emotional, too important, but we had waited long enough. 35 years for me, 38 years for her. We weren't stopping now. A few minutes later, we found an old VHS player in Sarah's garage. After nearly 20 minutes of cables, confusion, and laughing at ourselves, we got it working. Barely. The television flickered. Static filled the screen. Then, there he was, Dad, older than I remembered, gray hair, reading glasses, a blue flannel shirt, the same one he wore every winter. For a moment, neither Sarah nor I moved. We just stared, because there he was, alive, smiling, breathing, talking. It felt impossible. Like time had folded in half. Dad adjusted the camera awkwardly, then laughed. Ha ha ha! Exactly the same laugh, exactly. My heart shattered and healed at the same time. Well, he rubbed the back of his neck. If you're watching this, technology either survived me or got dramatically worse. Sarah laughed through tears. I did too. Dad smiled. Then his expression softened, and suddenly the room felt sacred. If both of you are watching this together. His voice caught, just slightly. Then one of my biggest prayers came true. Neither Sarah nor I could breathe. Dad continued, I don't know how old you'll be. I don't know where life will take you. I don't know if you'll like each other. A small smile appeared. But I hope you do. Sarah started crying immediately. Hard, I reached for her hand. She squeezed mine. Dad looked directly into the camera, directly at us. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. He paused, long enough to make every word matter. Love wasted is the saddest thing in the world. The room fell silent. Dad continued, I wasted years. His eyes lowered. I let fear stop me. More silence. I should have fought harder. Sarah wiped tears away, so did I. Dad shook his head. But life doesn't give refunds. That sounded exactly like him, exactly. Then he smiled again, a gentle smile, the kind fathers save for their children. So don't waste your time. His voice became stronger, more certain. If you're angry, forgive. If you're scared, try. If you're hurting, talk. If you love someone, tell them. I felt those words land somewhere deep inside me, somewhere I'd been protecting for years, since the divorce, since losing him, since Daniel, maybe even longer. Dad wasn't finished. He leaned closer to the camera, and then said something that would change my life, something I still think about almost every day. You don't get extra years for being careful. The room disappeared. The television disappeared. Everything disappeared except that sentence. Because suddenly I saw my life clearly. For years I'd been surviving, protecting myself, avoiding risks, avoiding pain, avoiding disappointment, avoiding love, being careful, always careful. And where had it gotten me? Lonely, afraid, stuck. Dad smiled, a smile filled with kindness. The best things that ever happened to me came from taking chances. His eyes grew emotional. Your mothers, both of them. Sarah squeezed my hand harder. Dad laughed softly. Ha ha ha, they scared me to death. We laughed too, tears and laughter mixed together. Dad continued. So did becoming a father. His voice cracked. But I'd do it all again. A tear rolled down his cheek, an actual tear. And suddenly Sarah completely lost it, sobbing, weeping, years of pain pouring out all at once. I wrapped my arm around her. She leaned into me, like she'd been carrying this weight forever. Maybe she had. Dad took a long breath, then reached beside the camera, pulling out something. A photograph, a picture of me as a child, standing beside one of Sarah as a child. Two separate photos taped together. My heart stopped. He'd carried that picture all those years. Dad smiled proudly, like he was introducing us. These are my daughters. Not daughters. The word echoed inside me. Powerful, simple, beautiful. Then Dad looked directly into the camera one final time. And said, if life was fair, I'd be sitting between you right now. Silence, a long silence. Then he smiled, the warmest smile I'd ever seen. But if I'm not, his voice trembled. Take care of each other for me. That was it, the final message, the final request, the final gift. The screen faded to black. Static returned, and neither Sarah nor I moved for a long time. Minutes passed, maybe more. Finally, Sarah whispered, "He loved us." I nodded, unable to speak. Because she was right, not loved, loves, somehow it still felt present, still felt alive, awe. Then we opened the remaining envelopes. Inside were birthday cards, letters, stories, memories, advice, one for every year of Sarah's life, one for every year of mine. He'd written them in advance, just in case he wasn't there. By midnight, we had read dozens. By 2 a.m., we had read dozens more, laughing, crying, remembering, learning, healing together. And sometime around 3 a.m., while sitting on the floor surrounded by photographs and memories, I realized something extraordinary. I came looking for answers about my father, but what I found was a sister, a family, a second chance, and for the first time in years, maybe for the first time since Dad died, I felt whole, not healed, healing. There's a difference, and healing had finally begun. What neither Sarah nor I knew yet was that Dad's final lesson wasn't hidden in a letter, or a videotape, or a chest. It was hidden in what happened next, because 6 months later, a phone call would arrive, and that phone call would force me to make the biggest decision of my life, a decision involving someone I thought I'd never see again, someone whose name I hadn't spoken in over 2 years, Daniel. And when that call came, everything would change. What neither Sarah nor I knew yet was that Dad's final lesson wasn't hidden in a letter, or a videotape, or a chest. It was hidden in what happened next, because 6 months later, a phone call would arrive, and that phone call would force me to make the biggest decision of my life, a decision involving someone I thought I'd never see again, someone whose name I hadn't spoken in over 2 years, Daniel. And when that call came, everything would change. Life became surprisingly peaceful after that night. Not perfect, peaceful, there's a difference. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly waiting for something bad to happen. Sarah and I talked almost every day, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 3 hours. We made up for 38 years surprisingly fast. Ha ha ha. Turns out shared DNA is weird. The similarities kept appearing. We both loved old bookstores. We both hated mushrooms. We both cried during animal rescue commercials. And somehow we both owned exactly the same coffee mug. Neither of us could explain that one. Charlie loved her immediately, which was honestly the highest endorsement available. If Charlie trusted you, you were probably a decent human being. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, really good. Till the phone rang. It happened on a Thursday, a completely ordinary Thursday. I was watering plants, killing them accidentally. As usual, when my phone lit up. Unknown number. Normally I ignored unknown numbers, always, but something made me answer, maybe instinct, maybe fate, maybe curiosity, I don't know. Hello, silence, then a voice I hadn't heard in over 2 years. Emily. Everything inside me froze. Daniel. For a moment I genuinely thought I was imagining it. Hallucinating, dreaming, anything except reality, because hearing his voice felt impossible, like hearing a ghost. Neither of us spoke. Finally I managed. "Why are you calling?" The question sounded colder than I intended, but not colder than I felt. A long pause followed. Then Daniel said something strange, something unexpected. "I need help." Immediately every emotion I'd buried came rushing back. Anger, heartbreak, confusion, love, resentment, everything all at once. I sat down slowly because suddenly my legs felt weak. "What happened?" Daniel took a shaky breath, and for the first time, I heard fear, real fear, the kind you can't fake. The kind that changes a person's voice. "It's Lauren." Lauren. The name landed like a stone. I hadn't heard it in years, hadn't wanted to, my stomach tightened. "What about her?" Silence. Then, "She's gone." Gone, I frowned. "What do you mean gone?" His answer shattered me. "She died." The world stopped, again, just like it had when Dad died, just like it had so many times before. Everything became quiet, very quiet. Lauren, dead, 32 years old, gone, awe. I closed my eyes, trying to process it, trying to understand, trying to feel something. Daniel's voice broke completely. "The accident happened 3 weeks ago." I couldn't speak. 3 weeks, and he was only calling now. Then I understood. He wasn't calling because Lauren died. He was calling because grief had finally arrived. Sometimes grief is late. Sometimes shock gets there first. Then reality catches up and crushes you. Daniel sounded destroyed, absolutely destroyed. Part of me wanted to hang up, honestly. Part of me thought I should, after everything, after the lies, after the betrayal, after the pain. But another part of me remembered something. A sentence from Dad's videotape. "If you're hurting, talk." I stayed on the line for nearly 2 hours, mostly listening. Daniel talked, I listened. Sometimes that's all people need. Someone to witness the pain, nothing more, nothing less. When the call ended, I sat alone in my living room, Charlie sleeping beside me, rain tapping against the windows, and I cried. Not for Daniel, not for Lauren, not exactly. I cried for everyone, for Dad, for Sarah, for myself, for all the ways life changes without permission, for all the endings nobody sees coming, The next morning, Sarah called. Apparently she could hear sadness through phone lines, a superpower, honestly. "What's wrong?" I told her everything, the entire conversation, every detail. She listened quietly, then asked, "Do you still love him?" The question hit hard, very hard, because I didn't know, not really. Love isn't a light switch. You don't just turn it off, even after betrayal, even after heartbreak. Sometimes pieces remain, tiny pieces, hidden pieces, stubborn pieces. I don't know. Sarah was quiet. Then she said something I never forgot. "Maybe that's not the right question." I frowned. "What is?" She answered immediately. "Do you trust him?" The room went silent, because suddenly I knew, immediately, completely. No, I didn't, not even a little, and somehow that answer mattered more. Weeks passed. Then another phone call came. Then another, then another. Daniel never asked to get back together, never. He never even hinted at it. Instead, he talked about grief, loss, regret, life. The conversations became easier, lighter, more honest. For the first time in years, we spoke without pretending, without performing, without hiding. Just two people, broken in different ways, trying to understand life. Then one evening, Daniel asked a question that changed everything. "Would you meet me?" My heart immediately started racing. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't know if I could. Meeting him meant reopening old wounds, old memories, old pain. The next few days were torture. Part of me wanted to say no, forever. Part of me wanted closure. Eventually, I agreed. A simple coffee shop, public place, neutral territory. Funny how life loves repeating itself. When I walked inside, Daniel was already there. Older, thinner, sadder. The moment he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. And suddenly I saw it. The guilt, the regret, the years, everything. We sat, awkwardly at first, then less awkwardly, then surprisingly comfortably. Hours passed. We talked about Dad, about Sarah, about life, about grief, about mistakes, and eventually, about us. The conversation neither of us could avoid. Daniel stared at his coffee, then quietly said, "I was selfish." No excuses, no explanations, no blame, just truth. I respected that more than he probably realized. "I know," his eyes filled. "I hurt you." I nodded, more silence. Then he said, "The biggest mistake of my life." For a moment my heart softened. Not because the pain disappeared, because I finally believed he understood it, really understood it. That's different, very different. Hours later we walked outside. The sun was setting, orange light everywhere. Beautiful, peaceful. Daniel looked at me and asked the question I'd been dreading, the question I knew would eventually come. "Is there any chance for us?" My heart broke, not because I didn't know the answer, because I did. I knew immediately, completely, absolutely. I looked at him, this man I once loved, this man I once planned forever with, and for the first time, I felt no anger, no bitterness, no resentment. Only sadness and gratitude. Gratitude for what we had, sadness for what we lost. The answer came softly. "No." Daniel closed his eyes just briefly, then nodded, as if he already knew. Maybe he did. A tear slipped down his cheek. I hugged him, one final time, a long hug, a goodbye hug, a thank you hug, a forgiveness hug, not a second chance hug. There's a difference, and both of us knew it. When we stepped apart, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter, not because he came back, because I finally let him go completely. For years I'd carried the weight of that ending. The questions, the anger, the what-ifs. Now they were gone. Dad was right. Love wasted is sad, but forgiveness isn't. Forgiveness doesn't excuse what happened. It frees you from carrying it. And that evening, standing beneath a golden sunset, I finally understood the difference. What I didn't know yet was that life wasn't finished surprising me, because 2 months later, while helping Sarah organize another box of Dad's belongings, I would discover a photograph, one photograph, a photograph that would lead me to a person I never expected to meet, a person connected to my father, connected to my future, and connected to a chapter of my life I thought was already over. What I didn't know yet was that life wasn't finished surprising me. Because 2 months later, while helping Sarah organize another box of Dad's belongings, I would discover a photograph, one photograph, a photograph that would lead me to a person I never expected to meet, a person connected to my father, connected to my future, and connected to a chapter of my life I thought was already over, the chapter called love. It started on a rainy Sunday. Sarah and I were sitting on her living room floor, again, surrounded by boxes, again. Honestly, I think we spent half a year digging through Dad's belongings. The man saved everything, receipts, birthday cards, maps, instruction manuals. Who keeps instruction manuals from the 1980s? Apparently our father. Ha ha ha. Sarah laughed, I laughed. Then we found another photo album. Neither of us expected much, just more memories, more photographs. More pieces of a life already lived. But halfway through the album, something caught my eye, a photograph I'd never seen before. Dad stood beside a younger man, both smiling, both wearing work clothes, standing in front of Dad's repair shop. The photo looked ordinary at first. Then I noticed the writing on the back, my father's handwriting. To the best apprentice I ever had, proud of you, son. Frank. Son, I frowned. Dad never had a son. Sarah leaned closer. So who is this? Good question. I flipped the photo over again, studied the face. Late 20s, dark hair, warm smile, kind eyes, someone who looked familiar, not because I knew him, because he reminded me of Dad, not physically, emotionally. There was something about him, something difficult to explain. I slid the photograph into my purse, not sure why, just a feeling. One of those strange feelings that whispers, pay attention, so I did. Few days later, I visited Dad's old repair shop. The building had been sold years ago, but the neighboring businesses remained, including a diner that had been there forever. Inside worked a woman named Nancy. She'd known Dad for decades. When I showed her the photograph, her face immediately lit up. Oh my goodness. You know him, she laughed. Ha ha ha. Of course I know him. My heart jumped. Who is he? Nancy smiled. That's Michael. Michael. The name meant nothing, yet somehow felt important. Very important. He worked with your father for years. I stared at the photograph again. Are they related? Nancy smiled softly. No, then her smile grew. Although your dad certainly treated him like family. Family, the word echoed. Nancy continued. Michael lost his parents young. A pause. Your father kind of adopted him. My chest tightened. That sounded exactly like Dad, exactly if someone needed help. He helped if someone felt alone. He made room. That was who he was. I smiled, looking at the photograph. Then Nancy said something unexpected. He's still around. My head snapped up. What? She nodded. He owns a construction company now. I don't know why my heart suddenly started beating faster. It shouldn't have. This was just a stranger. A random person from Dad's past. Nothing more. Yet something felt different. I couldn't explain it. Not then, not yet. That night I told Sarah everything. Naturally, she immediately became invested, dangerously invested. Call him. What? Call him. No, absolutely call him. Ha ha ha, sisters are relentless. Apparently that's universal. For 3 days she wouldn't let it go. Every phone call ended the same way. Did you call Michael? No, you should. Finally, mostly to stop hearing about it, I called. The number Nancy gave me rang 3 times, then a voice answered. Hello, warm voice, calm voice. Comfortable voice. I immediately forgot everything I planned to say. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Smooth, Emily, very smooth, the voice chuckled. Ha ha ha, you okay? That somehow made me laugh too, and just like that, the awkwardness disappeared. An hour later we were still talking. 1 hour with a stranger, a complete stranger. Yet it felt easy, natural, effortless, something I hadn't felt in a very long time, maybe years. Before hanging up, Michael surprised me. Your dad talked about you all the time. The words hit hard, very hard, my throat tightened instantly. He did. Oh yeah, Michael laughed. Ha ha ha. He carried pictures. A tear slipped down my cheek. He bragged constantly. Another tear. He was unbelievably proud of you. For a moment I couldn't speak, because suddenly Dad felt close again. Like somehow this stranger had carried a piece of him forward, a piece I hadn't known existed. Over the next few months, Michael and I became friends, just friends, at least that's what I told myself. Coffee occasionally, phone calls, conversations, stories about Dad, stories about life, stories about everything. The friendship felt easy, safe, comfortable, which terrified me, because comfort had become dangerous after Daniel. Trust wasn't simple anymore. Love wasn't simple anymore. Nothing was. One evening Sarah looked at me across a restaurant table, smiling. That suspicious sister smile, the smile that means trouble. What? She grinned. You like him. I nearly choked on my drink. What? You like him? No, Emily. No, Emily. Ha ha ha. I hated that she was smiling because deep down, I knew she might be right. Months passed. The friendship deepened. Slowly, naturally, no pressure, no expectations, no games. One afternoon, Michael invited me to a charity event, nothing fancy, a community fundraiser, the kind Dad would have loved. At one point, I stepped outside for air. The sun was setting, the sky glowing orange, beautiful, quiet, peaceful. Michael joined me. Neither of us spoke immediately. We just stood there, watching the sunset. Then he said, "Can I tell you something?" My heart instantly sped up. Sure. He smiled nervously, which was unusual. Michael was rarely nervous. I almost didn't call you back, I laughed. Why? He looked down, then back at me. Because I liked you immediately. My breath caught. The world suddenly felt very still, very quiet. Michael continued. And that scared me. My heart melted a little, just a little, because I understood. Fear, I knew fear. I'd spent years living beside it, maybe living inside it. I looked at him, really looked at him. This kind man, this patient man, this man who never rushed me, never pressured me, never asked me to be anyone except myself. And for the first time, I realized something. I wasn't afraid because of Michael. I was afraid because of the past. There's a difference, a huge difference. Dad's voice suddenly echoed in my mind from the videotape. You don't get extra years for being careful. The sentence hit me again, hard, powerful, true. I smiled. Then laughed softly. Ha ha ha. Michael looked confused. What? I shook my head. Nothing, actually. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. Because in that moment, I finally understood Dad's last lesson. Life isn't about avoiding heartbreak. Heartbreak comes anyway. Loss comes anyway. Pain comes anyway. The goal isn't avoiding it. The goal is loving anyway, trying anyway, living anyway, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. I looked at Michael, then took a deep breath, a really deep breath, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. Not for perfection, not for forever, just hope, real hope. The kind that had been missing for a very long time. What I didn't know then was that the biggest challenge wasn't finding love again. It was learning to believe I deserved it. And that lesson would test me in ways I never expected. Because just when life finally seemed stable, a letter would arrive. A single letter, written years ago, hidden inside one of Dad's journals. A letter containing one final secret, a secret that would change not only my future, but Sarah's future too. And before it was over, our family would grow one more time. What I didn't know then was that the biggest challenge wasn't finding love again. It was learning to believe I deserved it. And that lesson would test me in ways I never expected. Because just when life finally seemed stable, a letter would arrive. A single letter, written years ago, hidden inside one of Dad's journals. A letter containing one final secret, a secret that would change not only my future, but Sarah's future too. And before it was over, our family would grow one more time. It happened 6 months after Michael and I started dating. Even now that sentence feels strange, dating. At 35, I thought I'd already lived my great love story. I was wrong. Life apparently enjoys surprises. Michael was patient, steady, the kind of person who showed up. Not occasionally, always. If he said he'd call, he called. If he said he'd be there, he was there. No drama, no games, no guessing. Honestly, after everything I'd been through, consistency felt romantic. Ha ha ha. Who knew? One Saturday afternoon, Sarah and I were sorting through another stack of Dad's journals. At this point, it felt endless. The man had documented everything. Weather, thoughts, random observations. One entire page was dedicated to complaining about a squeaky garage door. A full page. Sarah laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch. Ha ha ha. That's definitely his daughter. I pointed at her. You're laughing too hard for someone related to him. She laughed harder. Then something slipped from one of the journals. A folded envelope. Old, yellowed, sealed. Both of us froze immediately because we recognized the handwriting. Dad, the front simply read, "For my girls." Not again, not another one. My heart already hurt. Sarah's eyes were already watering. Neither of us had even opened it yet. Slowly, very slowly, I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long. Dad's familiar handwriting filled every line. I swallowed hard, then began reading aloud. "My girls, if you found this, then you've probably already found each other." Sarah immediately covered her mouth, tears forming. I kept reading. "You have no idea how much I hope that's true." My voice started shaking. "Dad knew," Sarah whispered. "He always believed we'd meet." I nodded, unable to answer. The letter continued, page after page. Stories, advice, love, memories, then suddenly, everything changed. Dad wrote, "There is one more thing you don't know." Sarah and I exchanged a look, instantly nervous. One more thing, after everything, what else could there possibly be? I continued reading, and then the room went silent, completely silent. Dad had written, "Several years ago, I discovered someone else." Someone else, my pulse quickened. Sarah's eyes widened, I kept reading. "Not another daughter." A pause. "Another son." I stopped, actually stopped reading. Sarah stared at me, I stared at her. Neither of us moved, neither of us breathed. A son, Dad had a son, another sibling. My brain refused to process it. This couldn't be happening again, could it? Apparently it could. Dad explained everything. Nearly 25 years earlier, a young man named Ethan had started working at the repair shop. 18 years old, homeless, alone, no family, no support, nothing. Dad took him in. At first it was simple, extra shifts, extra meals, extra guidance. Then something changed. The relationship became deeper, stronger, more personal. Dad became a father figure, not officially, not legally, but emotionally, completely. Eventually, Ethan joined the military, moved away. Started a life. Yet he never stopped writing, never stopped calling, never stopped considering Dad family. Dad's words were simple. "Ethan may not share our blood, but he shares my heart." Aw, tears immediately filled my eyes because that sounded exactly like him. Exactly. Love wasn't something Dad measured genetically. Love was something he gave, freely, without conditions, without limits. Sarah wiped her face, laughing through tears. "Ha ha ha! How many children did this man collect?" I laughed too, for the first time in minutes, then continued reading. The final page contained something unexpected, an address, a phone number, and one last request. "If possible, find Ethan." My throat tightened. "I don't want him to be alone." Silence, heavy silence. Then Sarah spoke. "We have to find him." Immediately, no hesitation, no debate, just certainty. I nodded because she was right. Dad had spent his life connecting people, building family, creating belonging. How could we ignore that? The next week became an adventure, a ridiculous adventure. Phone calls, internet searches, old records, military databases, dead ends, wrong numbers, confused strangers. One man spent 10 minutes explaining he was definitely not Ethan. Ha ha ha. By the end of the week, we were exhausted. Then, finally, a lead, a real lead, a current address. Colorado. Sarah called immediately. No answer. We left a message, then waited, and waited, and waited. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number, again. Apparently life loved unknown numbers, I answered. "Hello," a deep voice replied. "Is this Emily?" My heart jumped. "Yes." A pause, then, "This is Ethan." Silence, absolute silence. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he laughed nervously. "Ha ha ha. I honestly don't know how to start this conversation." I laughed too. Neither do I. For nearly 2 hours we talked, and by the end of that call, I understood why Dad loved him. Ethan was kind, funny, humble, warm. The type of person who made everyone feel comfortable. The type of person Dad naturally adopted. 3 weeks later, he flew in to meet us. I was nervous. Sarah was nervous. Everyone was nervous. Even Charlie was nervous or hungry, again, difficult to tell. When Ethan walked through the airport terminal, everything became emotional immediately. He wasn't Dad's biological son, but somehow, looking at him felt familiar, like seeing an old piece of home. Before anyone could say anything, Ethan started crying. Actual tears, big tears, embarrassed tears. "Ha ha ha. Sorry." He wiped his face. "I'm really bad at airports." That somehow made us laugh, then cry, then laugh again. The next few days felt surreal. Stories filled every conversation. Stories about Dad, stories we'd never heard, stories we'd never know otherwise. Apparently, Dad once drove 6 hours in a snowstorm to help Ethan replace a broken transmission. Apparently, he mailed birthday cards every year. Apparently, he called every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every major life event, always, without fail. The more we listened, the more complete Dad became. Not bigger, more complete. Like we were finally seeing the entire picture, not just the parts we personally knew. One evening, Ethan said something I'll never forget. We were sitting around Sarah's dining table, looking through old photographs, talking about Dad, laughing, crying, remembering. Then Ethan quietly said, "Your father saved my life." The room immediately fell silent. No one interrupted. No one moved. Ethan stared at one photograph, a picture of Dad smiling beside the repair shop. Then Ethan continued. "When I met him, I had nothing." His voice cracked. No family. A pause. No direction. Another pause. No hope. Tears appeared in his eyes. He changed everything. Nobody spoke because some truths deserve silence. Then Ethan smiled, a small emotional smile. And now somehow, he looked at Sarah, then me, then Charlie sleeping under the table. I have a family. That broke all of us, immediately, tears everywhere. Laughter, crying, hugs, the whole mess. Exactly the kind of moment Dad would have loved. Maybe the kind of moment he spent years hopping for. That night after everyone left, I sat alone on my porch, watching the stars, thinking about everything. Dad, Sarah, Ethan, Michael, life, loss, love, family. And suddenly I realized something extraordinary. Dad's greatest achievement wasn't his business or his house or anything he owned. It was people. He built people, he connected people, he loved people, and decades later, that love was still creating family. Still bringing strangers together, still changing lives. I smiled, looking up at the night sky, and for the first time in many years, the grief felt different. Lighter, softer, almost peaceful. Life had one final chapter waiting, one final challenge, one final moment that would test everything I'd learned, because 3 months later, Michael would ask a question that terrified me, a question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer, and the answer would determine the rest of my life. Life had one final chapter waiting, one final challenge, one final moment that would test everything I'd learned, because 3 months later, Michael would ask a question that terrified me. A question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer, and the answer would determine the rest of my life. It happened on a Friday, a perfectly ordinary Friday, the kind of day that doesn't seem important until later, until you realize it changed everything. Michael called around noon. His voice sounded strange, not bad, just nervous, very nervous, which immediately made me nervous. Everything okay? A pause, then, yeah. Another pause, too long, definitely too long. I laughed. Ha ha ha. Michael, what? You're acting weird. He laughed too, a guilty laugh. Ha ha ha. Maybe. That evening he asked if I wanted to take a drive. Nothing unusual. We drove together all the time, so I agreed. An hour later we were heading toward the coast. Windows down, music playing softly. The sky painted gold by the setting sun. Beautiful, peaceful, comfortable. Everything I had come to associate with him. Eventually we arrived at a small cliff overlooking the ocean. I recognized it immediately. Dad used to bring me there, when life felt confusing, when decisions felt impossible, when I needed perspective. The realization hit me instantly. This wasn't random, not even a little. Michael parked the truck, turned off the engine, and suddenly the world became quiet, only waves, wind, and our breathing. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then Michael smiled, a nervous smile. The kind that appears when someone is about to change their life. Or yours, maybe both. Do you remember what your father used to say? My throat tightened immediately, because there were hundreds of answers, hundreds. Michael laughed softly. Ha ha ha. That doesn't narrow it down, does it? I shook my head. No. He looked toward the ocean, then quietly said, you don't get extra years for being careful. The words hit me like lightning. Dad's words. The words that changed everything. The words that pulled me back into life. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Michael continued. Your father told me that when I was 19, he smiled. I was scared to join the military. A pause. He practically pushed me into it. I laughed. That sounded exactly like Dad, exactly. Michael looked at me, really looked at me, and suddenly I knew, before he spoke, before he moved, before anything happened, I knew. My heart started racing. Fast, very fast, because some moments announce themselves before they arrive. This was one of them. Michael took a deep breath, then another, then another. Honestly, it was adorable, ha ha ha. The poor man looked terrified. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. The world stopped. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, like everything suddenly stepped aside, making room for the moment. My eyes immediately filled with tears, not because of the ring, because of everything. The journey, the pain, the healing, the people, the years, all of it. Michael looked down briefly, then back at me. I had a speech. I laughed through tears. What happened to it? He groaned. I forgot all of it. That made me laugh harder, so did him. For a moment we both stood there laughing, ha ha ha. Then he shook his head, smiling, and said, okay, a deep breath. Let's try this again. His voice softened, became serious, honest, beautifully honest. Emily. The wind carried his words, gentle, steady. I don't promise perfect. A tear slipped down my cheek. I don't promise easy. Another tear. I don't promise we'll never hurt each other. My heart felt too full, too emotional, too everything. Michael swallowed, then continued. But I promise you'll never face life alone. Ah, that broke me completely because for years, being alone had been my greatest fear. Not physically alone, emotionally alone. The kind of loneliness that sits beside you even when rooms are full. Michael kept speaking, and every word felt real, not rehearsed, not polished. Real, I choose you. His voice cracked. Every day. Another pause, even when life gets hard. Another. Especially when life gets hard. Tears streamed down my face now, completely uncontrollable. Michael smiled, his own eyes wet. Then finally asked, "Will you marry me?" Silence, the ocean, the wind, the sky, everything seemed to pause, waiting, and suddenly, I was terrified, not because I didn't love him, because I did, deeply, completely. The fear came from somewhere older, somewhere deeper. The 12-year-old girl watching her parents divorce, the 32-year-old woman discovering betrayal, the grieving daughter, the abandoned wife. All those versions of me suddenly standing together, asking the same question. What if it happens again? What if this breaks too? What if love leaves? What if then another voice appeared? Dad's voice, from the videotape, clear as day, love anyway, try anyway, live anyway. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I understood. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. That's what Dad had been trying to teach me. Not just in the videotape, not just in letters, his entire life. Love requires courage, family requires courage, hope requires courage, everything worthwhile does. I opened my eyes, looked at Michael, this patient man, this kind man, this man who never asked me to be less broken, never asked me to heal faster, never asked me to be someone else. And suddenly the answer felt obvious, not easy, but obvious. I laughed through tears. Ha ha ha! Michael looked confused, terrified, poor guy. Then I nodded. Yes. His face changed instantly. Relief, joy, disbelief, everything at once. Really? I laughed harder. Really? The next thing I knew we were hugging. Laughing, crying, the whole emotional disaster, exactly the way it should have been. When we finally pulled apart, the sunset had almost disappeared, night slowly arriving, stars beginning to appear, beautiful, perfect. A few weeks later we told Sarah. She screamed, actually screamed. Loudly, very loudly, Charlie started barking. The neighbors probably became concerned, ha ha ha. Then Ethan cried, immediately, no warning, no hesitation, just tears. Then Sarah cried, then I cried. Then somehow everyone was crying, even Michael looked close. The entire family had become emotional chaos, exactly the kind Dad would have loved. Months later, while planning the wedding, something unexpected happened, something wonderful. Sarah stood beside me during a dress fitting, quiet, thoughtful. Then suddenly she said, "You know." "What?" She smiled, a soft, emotional smile. "Dad did it," I frowned. "What?" She looked around the room, at all of us, at the family that existed because one man refused to stop loving people. Then she whispered, "He brought us together." And she was right. Dad never got to see the ending, not physically. But somehow, his fingerprints were everywhere, on every friendship, every reunion, every relationship, every second chance, including mine, especially mine. That night I sat alone on my porch, looking at the stars, the same way I had done so many times before, only this time felt different, peaceful, complete. For years I thought my story was about heartbreak, then I thought it was about grief, then family, then forgiveness, but sitting there beneath the stars, I finally understood. My story had always been about love, the love that remains, the love that survives, the love that returns when you least expect it, and most importantly, the love that grows when shared. I smiled, looking toward the sky, and quietly whispered, "Thanks, Dad." The wind moved softly through the trees, almost like an answer, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't looking backward anymore. I was looking forward, toward family, toward hope, toward tomorrow, and toward a future I was finally ready to embrace. But one final chapter remained. The wedding, the reunion, the emotional ending that would bring every thread of this journey together. And before it was over, there wouldn't be a dry eye in the room. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me about the door that opened for you. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.